Hi everyone, I'm Sean from Sean's Tech Blog, and I'm here with Ronnie. Ronnie to talk about. He's going to be talking about real world tips, configs, troubleshooting, best practices. What I wish I knew when I started with Cisco. So, we're going to start with the practicals, hands-on advice, and I'm going to let Ronnie take it over from here right now.
Yeah, some of the things that as I look back over when I first started to study for my CCNA, really getting into the realm of Cisco and understanding things, I didn't know what I was doing when I first started. So I tried to study for it in the same way I studied for other exams. And I realized something now after teaching it for a long time, and then also picking up on some of the different tips along the way, is that there's probably a better way. Some things that I wish I would have known before I started that we're actually going to be able to kind of pull from it, and that's what we're going to actually do today. So let's talk about the idea of practical hands-on advice when it comes to this idea. And this begins with probably more than anything else is what happens when you make common mistakes over and over again. And what I mean by that, right? Especially when it comes down to Cisco, it's all about two things, right? You have the knowledge to succeed. You've got to actually have the knowledge. And then the second one is understand the idea of pressure that they're putting on you. They can't put you into a real world situation in which, they're saying, hey, the network is failing. You're losing tens of thousands of dollars in the next hour if you don't fix everything. What they're going to do is put that into a time pressure of you having to answer these questions. And realistically, when it comes to the exam and trying to study for it, you have about a minute per question, okay? And if you haven't gotten the answer in a minute per question, more than likely that indicates something, which is why I wanted to kind of think about this here. It indicates you probably don't have the knowledge to actually answer that question. And that's what it comes down to. So how do you actually get that knowledge? How do you actually improve on that? Is that you want to actually take a look at how you are typing the configs out in a couple of different things, in a couple of different ways. It's easy to start out slow is what you need to, but you need to constantly improve on things like your speed in typing in commands into the CLI. So when you go ahead and you start typing, you can't just go, okay, we're going to configure terminal, CONF. You've got to begin to type it quickly as fast as you can, because it's only going to get faster. You're only going to get more, under pressure as you realize you're falling behind on the exam. So when you start making those typos, figure out how you actually repeat that to the point where you're not making those typos anymore, but you got to get faster at doing it. And that's kind of the way that you do that, is when you are studying and you do get access to something like Packet Tracer or even your own lab that you might have set up, you've got to try and constantly move faster. The faster you move, the more that the knowledge gets in there and it becomes muscle memory with your fingers and your brain. That is the point that you want to get. So that's what I would say is a practical tip that I can actually give somebody to try and actually improve on Cisco when they're actually learning it. If you don't, okay, more than likely there's two things, right? You either don't have the knowledge or you're just not fast enough to finish the exam. There's a lot of people that actually go out there and they just don't have time to finish the exam. It's not they don't have the knowledge, it's just that they don't have time. So that very practical advice, especially when it comes to common mistakes, is not putting yourself under pressure. Even on a practice exam, is to give yourself a minute time limit. And even if it doesn't kind of kick you out of it, just mark yourself when you're actually doing a practice question or anything like that, if you're going through that, and say, I didn't figure it out in a minute. That means I don't have enough knowledge, or I haven't actually configured it quick enough to do what I need to do. So you've got to be able to move faster. So that's a very practical aspect of something that we can actually use in the realm of Cisco. But I think if you started off with that knowledge, you would actually start to try and figure that out much quicker.
Very useful tips. And I've never taken one of those Cisco tests, but now it's good to know that, you have to practice for the test and be speed. Speed is the key, and make sure you have the knowledge as well. And then I guess that's timing is key, right? So I think if we can touch on any other mistakes that you can think on of common Not just test wise, but just every day.
Sure. So another practical piece of advice that we can also kind of share on beyond the realm of common mistakes, excuse me, is going to be the idea of real world troubleshooting. Now, this doesn't mean you have to break something so that you can troubleshoot and figure it out, but you have to know how to approach troubleshooting in a systematic manner. And Cisco, studying for a Cisco exam teaches you that. And until you actually get into that particular position where you are given a troubleshooting example, if you approach it a different way each time you see one, you're never going to get through the exam. But secondly, it's also impractical when it comes to real world troubleshooting in a network. Whether you're working at help desk or network administrator, you approach the problems in the same way. So how do I approach it? In the way that I would recommend, pick a method. If there's a particular method that your company teaches, follow that method. But if you don't have one and your company doesn't force one on you, choose the OSI model in networking and use that. Begin to troubleshoot using the OSI model as your basis of working through different things that have to be right before networking or connectivity disappears. So you want to make sure you have the basic network connection. Physical cables are there. You have blinking lights on your NIC, right? You have IP addresses. You have all this stuff actually set up correctly. And at some point, you're going to run into something and it's going to say, hey, this isn't actually right. And that's where you know you can actually begin troubleshooting. The key also is not to speed up when you're troubleshooting. It is simply to actually do what we call the idea of slowing down to speed up. It's an unusual paradox here, right? And the unusual paradox is this, is that learning something slow until the point where it becomes smooth, where you know you're moving from one particular issue to another. So we take the OSI model, I'm moving from the physical, then to the network or the data link layer, and then to the network layer, then to the transport layer, session, and you continue to go up. When that actually becomes smooth in your brain, you will then become faster because smooth is fast. For those that actually have taken any type of firearms training, especially for those that do things like, and actually watch a lot of videos on it too, from guys that are actually working on the special forces team, they always talk about this idea. Slow is smooth, and smooth is how you become fast in terms of you drawing your weapon, whatever it might be. If that goes through your mind, then you're doing it right as well. And that's what you want to do as a practical way to also troubleshoot in the real world. Another thing that is very practical too, to actually think about, always troubleshoot at the very beginning from the standpoint of the end user. And what I mean by that is, if if you've worked help desk, which I'm sure you have, just about everybody that's been in the field has had to go through that. You got to have an understanding of what that end user is going through, and then use those symptoms and troubleshoot your way up to the networking side that you need to. If you always start from the standpoint of the administrator, you never understand what is the frustration that they're facing and what is failing. You're just assuming that you know what's happening there. So always start from that standpoint. And then if you can exhaust everything that they're actually facing, then troubleshoot from the network administrator standpoint as well. And that really does help you out because, again, it's a methodical approach at troubleshooting, right? You have a model, you have a method. Now you're understanding. When you come to an issue, always think about it from the same perspective. Don't go bouncing back and forth. You're going to get lost at some point of where you're troubleshooting and what you're trying to do. Always begin with that particular type of approach to do so as well. And of course, when it comes to overall things like configurations and stuff that you might have to actually look into, that's beyond the idea of the end user, is to verify configurations. People can get very upset when you go, well, it may be a configuration issue, and somebody says, there's no way, I typed it in, I know it's perfect. You're not trying to contradict that. You're trying to say, I'm just verifying using my methodology that I know to actually be able to say everything is in place in the way that it is. And that really is helpful when it comes to real world troubleshooting as well. Always approach it in the same approach. You actually figure a lot of things out better and faster too.
Okay, and since we've transitioned to real world troubleshooting, it made me wonder about I've never been in the tier 3 level. I'm usually tier 1, tier 2 level. But
Mhm.
how does that work from a network administrator? And then you have to balance, I'm assuming, with the other stakeholders. You have to have these meetings when the network's down. IT support is getting out to you. And then
Mhm.
sometimes they have a hard time describing because some of them, like me, have just we've activated a port. We got to activate a port. Okay, that's something small, but we haven't. We just know the network's down, and we can test. Oh, is it just this user, this computer? Oh no, it's actually bigger than us. And then we're um, working on the communication as a team. So how what are some best practices working with the stakeholders and then people that are not in, they're in IT support. And then
Mhm.
rarely, I think, or it depends on the organization, do tier 3 IT network administrators, unless they're high up there, a VP that reaches out directly to you. But rarely do I think they deal with users. So how do
Yeah.
the
So
communication with different teams?
yeah, there's a couple of different ways that that happens, right? If you work for an organization that's big enough where you already have a checklist of things that you're actually working on level one, and then automatically tells you if you've gone through this flow chart and you're here, it means you've got to escalate it because one, you might not have the privileges to do what you want to, even though you might know what the issue is, or two, you really are out of options. So if you have that already set up, then they're trying to make it much more efficient to say you've gone through this, it's taking you 45 minutes of time, you shouldn't be troubleshooting any longer than 45 minutes at level one. Then they have to escalate it because at that point you've probably exhausted every question you can ask an end user, and whatever level of access that you had is not resolving it. So there comes that point when it just is costing the company more money to keep you trying to troubleshoot rather than escalate it up to someone else that actually can take a look at it more in depth. Maybe they have better view of the overall network because they have more tools or more access to some things that they need to. So it may be the service level agreement, even internally in that sense of how that ends up working out. But by the time it gets to level 3, that's probably an architectural thing. That means something is wrong, what you believe is wrong with probably the design or the equipment in the network itself. Not that there's a configuration issue, not that there's a typo somewhere that you don't have access to change or it affects everybody. More than likely, if it's a overall design issue, is something that's affecting the company in terms of maybe thousands of dollars per hour or maybe higher. So that's how it actually begins to troubleshoot up in that sense of things a lot of times to be able to do so. So it's all about how your company is set up to handle that situation. Most of the time at level one and even level two, it might be that flow chart or that checklist of things that you have to go through. And once you exhaust that, then it's like, hey, we've got to move this up to more than likely a senior architect or a senior engineer to figure this stuff out.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move us over to network setup tips and how to
Mhm.
stay good. If you can talk on that.
Sure. Most of us are probably not going to ever get a chance to set up a completely full network on our own in the real world. The reason why is that you generally get hired at a company that already has an existing network. But in the lab setting, though, a lab setting, you absolutely have a chance to 100% set up a network that you want to work within and troubleshoot and design. And the way that I've always done it in the past when I've actually been working is simple. I've tried to mirror, even inside of a lab, of the network I was currently a part of. I didn't have access to everything. I didn't know everything, but I knew I had end user workstations. I had access layer switches. I had multi-layer switches. I had servers that actually essentially worked as a data center together, that we could actually access to. We had web servers that were out there, and of course we had an internet gateway or access out to the internet. So if I could actually model something like that, even in my own lab, whether it was on Packet Tracer or GNS3 or even G, whatever it actually was that I was using at the point, it gave me a sense that I said, okay, how do I actually move a packet from me where I'm sitting at a workstation all the way out to the internet? Or how is it that I'm accessing through to the web server? How is it that I'm actually able to do that? Or what's blocking me from doing that? So you can use something like that as well. And along the way, when you're building that, even in your setting, always think according to the networking model, the OSI model, because that's what it's designed to do. It's designed to help you to ensure that you have communication or connectivity at each stage along the way of what could actually happen. So I always use the OSI model as things that I know that have to be in place for the network to work. And again, once I've set it up according to the OSI model, means I can troubleshoot according to the OSI model as well. So that's the way that I would actually work that out in terms of network setup tips. And I learned that fairly early because at the beginning of every, everybody teaches a little bit differently and they always give you the most basic things. I always tried to actually emulate something I knew I was already working in. And I would say that that probably brings you a little bit more consternation at the same time, but it makes you dig and figure out along the way, like, where am I actually not getting out if I needed to connect to, a web server out, out on the internet? How does DNS actually connect back through? All that actually did end up helping me to actually put it into good context right away when I started thinking about the way that I needed to troubleshoot things too. So setting that up is also going to be something, like I said, that is really helpful to you in a very practical aspect of how you can actually do better. If I knew that from the start, I probably would have taken more time instead of rushing through things. I thought, I don't have to worry about that right now. I just, and worry about a few things here. But taking time to set that up, I think really does help for you to actually be able to be more effective at what you do. It already puts it into context for you. And that's something that you can always appreciate.
Okay. So, and we're talking about these labs. So we would be setting it up like, well, this day and age, you would recommend a physical home lab, trying to get some used refurbished, and then virtually for the things that are cost prohibitive, I'm assuming, but try to keep it, try to set up your home network, right? You start there.
So it kind of just depends on how much you really want to get in that. Having a home lab is awesome, okay? But it is expensive, not because you can't buy the equipment on eBay right now for cheaper than you ever could in the past. But the issue with it is it's equipment. You have to put it somewhere. And I'm pretty sure if you're married, your wife doesn't want it on the kitchen table, doesn't want it on the dining room table as you're connecting things. Those things can get loud as well. So yes, in the past, I would have said that's the only way you're going to ever be able to figure this out. But today, with the virtualization of these products that are out there, Packet Tracer is 100% free. You can go to Net Academy, Cisco's Net Academy, download it, and just create an account there on, I think it's the blue button. And you can create an account. It doesn't cost you anything. And you can build your network in the Packet Tracer if you choose to. And it's enough to get you at the CCNA level. Its drawback is unusually some of the output that they give you is fake, because they can only emulate so much or simulate so much, and then the rest they just have to go, okay, it's a simulation. You're not going to know that you're not looking at real things that are actually happening on this fake network. But yeah, you can do that. And GNS3, as far as the platform itself, is free. Getting the images, not so free. But Cisco has an offer. If you're willing to spend a couple of $100s, it's the Cisco CML. It gives you the ability to have up to 20 devices on your network, but you do have to run it as a virtual machine on your particular, desktop computer if you choose, or you can set up a server to do it, however you actually want to as well. And even G is the same way. But if you don't even want to try and do that, you can go to Cisco's DevNet, and I think it's developer.cisco.com, and you can actually use that CML for free. You have to schedule it, sometimes, but you can actually build something in there to actually do your own Cisco practice if you choose to. Now, that one absolutely works, but you may have to schedule around other people, which means you have a 4 a.m. lab time. It might not always be the thing that you want, but if you need to do it, you got to do it. So there's different ways you can get around it without having to buy equipment. But if you really want to get into the hands-on, like I'm going to be installing equipment, yeah, a home lab is probably the way to go, so that you at least understand what does it take for me to actually get this stuff up and running and connected, and the basic configuration. It's kind of the hands-on way. Most people today, I think, would probably go with the virtual side of it, because like I told you, for $200, you can build a 20 node network. As long as you have the resources like RAM and CPU to do it, you can build a pretty hefty network to be able to do something like that, instead of having to try and buy, 5 routers and, 3 layer 3 switches and 2 access layer switches, and then a PC so you can actually, prove that there's a PC out there, and act like a server on this one. So you can actually put all that inside of a virtualized environment today. It's worth taking a look at.
Okay. I'm assuming we've touched on the lab practices going with the GNS3. And then before we get to the staying connected topic, I wanted to ask regarding there's a computer networking on site, right? But now there's so much of hybrid environments with cloud.
Right.
But how does that work? And then that goes back to permission. We're working with a different team. And then there's the cyber security element of it. And then I wanted to see if you could touch on what skills you think some cybersecurity analysts, people that are trying to break into cybersecurity, or going in that it's a been hot industry for a while. Some say oversaturate. And people don't have those computer networking skills, and I want to work on those computer networking skills because it's been my Achilles heel. So I'm gonna try to tackle. We'll start with that Network Plus first, and then I'm gonna work on that Cisco. But would you give some advice to people that want to get in there, and what do you think skills they need?
Yeah. When it comes down to the idea that you want to get in cybersecurity, or you want to actually do hardware, or you want to be a cloud engineer, whatever it might be, right? If you don't know by now, the IT industry, the heart of the IT industry is networking. If you do not have the strong foundation of networking, at some point you're going to cross something. You're going to say, I understand everything should be working now, but it's not. Whether you're in cybersecurity, like I said, or cloud, you're like, okay, I'm in cloud and it says I don't have network connectivity. Well, how do you actually know, what to do next? Well, you have to have that strong foundation in networking. And in cybersecurity, you're seeing the same things where a ton of people got hired essentially at the SOC 1 level, and they're supposed to have these skills to be able to do some of these things. And they might have the skills to understand, like, here's the next thing I should do. Here's what I was provided. But if it kind of was a broke down thing, which was a networking issue, they don't understand how to troubleshoot that. They don't understand how that breaks down. Even something as a fundamental networking skill as subnetting. They found out that some people just can't even tell whether or not the machine was put on a different subnet than another one when they weren't using the standardized, /24 subnet, right? The 255.255.255.0. And then they had another machine that looked like it was on the same subnet, but it was actually, 255.255.255.254. They didn't understand that was actually on a different network, even though the subnet looked exactly the same. That all comes from strong networking skills. So if you don't have networking as the basis of everything else you want to do, there is going to come a point when it's going to trip you up. Now, you will still get tripped up by other concepts out there, but you're not going to be tripped up by things that essentially is the foundational skill in which all the other things are resting on. So being able to actually have that strong foundation in networking is always good for whatever career you want in terms of IT. And if you go, well, I'm past that point. No, you aren't. Okay. Everybody can always go back and do a refresher. I do the same thing, even now. There are topics out there which I taught a long time ago I haven't had to face. So, for example, spanning tree protocol sounds easy enough when you read the name. It's only 3 letters, right? It's just a protocol. But how does it work? And then when you go, oh, yeah, I got to remember how all that works, it's a lot more confusing. So never get away from the idea that networking, everything you have to be able to verify. Is the network working and doing the things that it needs to? If not, doesn't matter what skills you're still going to get connectivity issues if you don't have those skills. So always go back and review that when you have a chance, especially if you don't understand it. If you don't, you need to take a look at, again, maybe what you did. Maybe I need to shift over here and get that foundational skills. And once you do, some of the things that you were trying to face when you were studying for cybersecurity may make a little bit more sense now too. So it really is helpful to get that idea down first to really help you out in everything else that you do.
I agree with everything you said, and learning from this, because as I've gone through a cyber boot camp last year, a lot of the focus as a tier 1 is where is the source IP address? Is this the one that keeps trying, and that's all we kind of focus on. And then, we're trying to look at the network diagram and then the topology, and then it goes to the cloud. And well, don't have that deep of knowledge yet. to, or the permissions, right? Because normally somebody had already set it up, so I don't know what's in there. So I think it makes sense to be the admin of your own lab, right? To
Mhm.
set it up instead of what I call a user, right? And other
Yep.
people just like I've said that when I'm in IT support, I'm like, well, I know this is in scope. These are the permissions I have. Out of scope, it's because I don't have the permissions and it has to go to another level. But
Yep.
there's like other applications. I'd go to service deck, fix the system. But unless you set up as the admin, you only know what to do as a user for that application. And I don't know if you can give me an example for networking on that, but analogy for that.
Yeah, it more than anything, right? If you just don't have the skill, it doesn't matter if they give you all the access or not, right? Because you can mess stuff up if you have more permissions than what you have at this point. So it's okay to explore, but once you start to reconfigure something, or you go, I wonder if I take this checkbox off and hit save, is that going to affect anything? Oh yeah, it may end up doing that. So excuse me, it may always be that idea that you do have to have some foundation to be able to kind of open the door for everything else that you're going to face too. So uh, it's not easy to actually say that there's a great analogy of that. The only thing that I can tell you is it always seems to be that whenever I've heard people, talk about the idea that, we hired, this position, they just didn't have the foundational skills. They wanted to be able to do this, and it's perfectly fine. They knew how to work the application. They knew how to use Wireshark, by turning it on, but they had no clue where to actually go and troubleshoot that, or why those numbers actually ended up mattering as well. So there's just so many different things that can happen. But if you have networking, it does kind of, you kind of realize everything loops back into it. And it may just be that one piece that you're missing, but if you're missing that one piece, it's an important piece. So never skip those skills in networking just so that you can move on faster. There's always going to be positions that will be there in the future that will wait for you. Networking, though, if you don't have that, those positions will leave you behind.
Okay, you touched on something. Jobs will be or positions will be there, and if I could just ask you before we move on to staying connected, um, what thoughts do you have on AI in computer networking?
Yeah, AI is wonderful in the very fact that it can help you troubleshoot something really quickly. But the thing that AI can't do at times, right, is to actually help you to take that information and make it practical at levels. Okay. You can say, oh, the AI will fix it. Well, what if the AI doesn't fix it, or doesn't fix it the way that you need it fixed? If you haven't run into the encounters with AI where it gives you almost the right answer, but not exactly, the right answer to be able to do that, then you kind of understand that AI can give you some things and can help you along the right direction, but it doesn't mean you don't have to still verify that these things are right. I've used AI to help me write a Python script before. And the strange thing is, even after writing that Python script and I ran it, all of a sudden I got errors that came out of that. And then when I actually said, well, why are we actually getting errors again? Said, here's the Python script you just wrote. Why am I still getting this error? I said, oh, well, you didn't say that you were on Ubuntu 2022.04. This would work with Ubuntu 18 or lower, and you're like, well, I wasn't expecting that. How, so AI, I think, can help you out in becoming faster, but it doesn't give you the knowledge that you need if AI doesn't work and doesn't do that. Will AI replace a lot of things very quickly? If everything goes to infrastructure as code, yeah, AI is probably going to really affect us hard. But at some point, there's going to need to be troubleshooting of that code that AI may not have all of the need or the information specific to your network yet to help you to troubleshoot that any better or faster than you can. So if you use it as a tool, it's very helpful. If you rely on it to the point where you don't know anything else, but AI just figured it out for me. Always take whatever the output is and verify by you doing research to see whether or not it actually works or not. Um, Yeah, in the past year, I've been running more and more of these things, especially with not configurations, but just trying to build labs programmatically and by using Python. Like, I wonder if AI can help me build something like this. And then it says, yeah, absolutely, I can build that. But then when I look at it and when I run the output and I get errors, I realize that it's not everything that it's cracked up to be at that point in time. Unless I actually have all the same exact equipment it learned from, then I don't have that knowledge ready to go. And you can't do that in a real business network, right? You need to actually, have the information you need right then and there and not have to troubleshoot AI. And, and then, you know, not only are you not, you don't have the information, but now you're having to troubleshoot AI to get you the right information. That's when it becomes difficult as well. It can cause not more issues, but different issues that you weren't expecting to have to troubleshoot. So I would take some caution with AI in terms of learning skills, but at the same time, can it be helpful and help you speed up? Absolutely. So it's a skill worth learning, but the best use of you trying to learn AI is to try and learn how to use it effectively more than anything else at the SOC 1 level. Not say, oh, run through this test for me and spew out whatever result it needs to. What if it gives you an error at the end of the result? Are you now going to have to feed that back into AI to help you determine what that means? And what if another error appears after that? You're going to continue to feed it in until you're actually just chasing those. So you always have to come back to, you have to have the knowledge to be able to help even in that point.
Okay. I wanted to switch gears to stay connected. What can you touch on that? Computer network.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different things that I'm trying to figure out the best way to say this. When I was learning about the CCNA, it was really neat because, not figuring out, like what I didn't know. So my boss at that time always had to say, you don't know what you don't know. Okay. I don't know if that makes sense to you or not, but you just don't know what you don't know. And so that meant that it was me trying to actually figure out how to do something. But then I realized something. I didn't know how to do this either. And then all of a sudden now you're actually saying, well, what am I missing rather than what do I actually need to do? What else am I missing here? That is all of business, right? It's not the idea of just fixing it. You can fix a problem, but you might not have gotten to the root of the problem, right? And so you might fix something and all of a sudden it happens again tomorrow or happens some other way that you're like, why does this keep happening? It's because you want to get to the root of what you need. And when it comes down to something like you becoming better, it's always better for you to stay connected with things like learning communities that are out there. Cisco has a very active learning community. I've never been on a Cisco forum where they said, you want to know something? You should just read better, Ronnie. You should already have that knowledge. You shouldn't be asking that there. Everybody seems like they understand because they've all went through it, that they're trying to help you. Now, I've been on some other forums in which it's like, hey, you shouldn't even be asking this here. If you don't have that, you probably shouldn't be using this. And that's not helpful. But you can actually stay connected with other people that are in the same situation that you are if you're willing to stay connected in doing so. Social media is a big example of how you can actually use that to your advantage and have people reach out to you and help you too. If you go, hey, I'm running into this situation here, can anybody offer at least tips? And you'll start seeing that those things will kind of flood back in. And I saw one just on X today about a Kubernetes load issue that was going on. And, they said, well, now I'm at this and it's kind of slowing down to a crawl when something happens. And there were like 42 comments on how people could actually, help. And they were pointing those directions out. Staying connected, staying in touch with people gives you encouragement as well as help that you need at that point in time. Whether it's a real world situation in which you are working as a SOC 1 analyst or you're working as a network, engineer or, network technician at that point, keeping that connection really does help you to actually think about it in different ways that you didn't know that you even needed. And that's when you start realizing there are things I don't know that I don't know. So I need to find that out. I need to ask someone that might have more experience than I do. And not being afraid to ask. Formulate your question. Do all the research you can, but you still don't know. That's the time to ask. And at that point, you can say, hey, here are things that I know that I've tried to do. And it's not working. Can you help me? Can you point me in the right direction? A lot of people are more than willing to be helpful and try and help you out in that situation too. So I would always say, stay connected. Don't isolate yourself when you can't figure something out. Reach out and do what you can do, and you'll see people are willing to try and help you.
Okay. And then I wanted to touch on, well, before we wrap this up, we hear a lot of times as job seekers, right? Or maybe even Indian, how are we adding business value? So how can one demonstrate that they're adding business value in whatever their daily duty is or what they were doing? Because
Yeah.
a lot of times we're considered just as support, but somebody told me, I can't even say it. It's going to paraphrase, but we're enablers or something like that to whatever the business is, like revenue enablers. There you go. I think it was revenue.
Yeah. There, it's listening to the people around you and how they talk, right? And you're in that particular situation, is that when they say, "Hey, we want you to be revenue enablers," right? And what they're really saying is figure out how you can actually word that to help sell more services, to help to actually bring more value into it, to make them stay more connected. If there's a subscription to your particular idea of help desk, hey, glad you reached out. I noticed that you're actually on this level of subscription. We'd like to actually bring that forward. You can do stuff like that, right? That's what they want you to be able to do. But the other thing that you can do for yourself that will really help you to bring more value, right? It's what we call a value added in teaching, is to go ahead at that point and also stay current, stay at that edge of where you need to understand the situations that are happening around you. And what I mean by that is try and learn something every day. If you go, hey, sir, you use this term, revenue enabler. What do you mean by that? How do I apply that, right? You're not trying to actually make them force it, but you're trying to say, I want to take an interest in this company because I believe that's where my future is. How can I become a revenue enabler? I'm just help desk. If you don't know, really don't know, then you ask those questions. How do I move from support here to tier 2? What are the skills that I need? I really like to move that way. How is that possible? And they tell you, say, are there any company resources that can help me to do that? You might find out that there's company resources to help you do that. So if you do that, you show an interest in that company, you are sometimes, I'm not going to say every time, you are going to get on the radar of someone, especially now when something opens up, at tier 2, and they're saying, oh, who should we hire? You put your name in for it, you talk to your boss about it. You are now actually kind of opening that door and the opportunity. This guy really wants to learn. He seems to actually be able to grasp these concepts. He's keeping up to date. He's really helping, overall. You may want to consider him that, or that person to do so. So you bring value, I think, also involves you learning something. Make it a hobby of how you actually do that. Ask a new question every day. Don't have to be annoying about it, but when you hear something you don't know, think, I really don't understand that term. What does that actually mean? I think you'll see that goes a long way, because there's a lot of people that want you to actually ask that question so that they can have a chance to relay that knowledge to you to help you out too.
Okay. All right. Do you have any last words, motivation to give somebody if they're, having a tough time getting a job, or been a while, they've been out of work,
Yeah.
or they're trying to change careers into tech, to networking from, change from a lateral move?
Sure. So let's start with where I did, which was I was a career changer. Okay, so I came from the realm of diesel mechanics into the realm of IT. And so in that sense, can it be done? Absolutely. So don't let your current situation in which you go, there's no way I'm going to be able to figure this out and work it out, to limit you from making that your goal. The key, though, is to not let it overwhelm you when you see how much information is out there for you to learn. Break it down into manageable chunks of how you learn that. Make it a goal that, hey, I'm going to learn this concept today, or in the next 4 hours, I'm going to learn this concept. You sit down and you do it. So if you're a career changer, that's what I would suggest. If you're trying to make a lateral move inside of a company, asking those same questions with interest, and even going to the person that's hiring and saying, I think I'd like to move from where I am to this team. What are some things that can help? Showing that type of interest may not get you that job right away, but may at least lay a pathway for you to open that communication so that that can actually begin to happen, as well. So taking time to learn about the position that you're applying for, not just, oh, there's an opening at tier two, you know, understand, look at the job description and say, I can accomplish these things. I can do that. The only thing I don't have is the 5 years of experience that they're asking for, but I've been working here at help desk for this long. Do I have to, ask that pertinent question of, do I need that, or is that something that I can, continue to do as I'm working doing this? That can also help you. What if you're also training for a certification exam and you feel overwhelmed? Stop, breathe. Remember that the overall idea of studying for a certification exam is not a goal, it's an achievement. And what I mean by that, right, is that it's easy to actually think about any certification as a goal, and then once you're done, you forget all about it. I've walked out of an exam before, and I could tell you the next day, I felt like I don't have a clue of what I just took on that exam, the day after. Okay, and then had to go back and review those concepts again, just to make sure I understood what was happening to me. But if you look at it as an achievement, like, hey, when I take a certification exam, I'm just proving what I already know. But if you look at it as a goal, and then your mind will just forget it. So always take that chance to study harder and to study more about what technology that you're learning about and why it's important to you to know. And you'll find out something that the exams will actually go a lot easier as well. So, those are situations that you can always think about.
What I take from that is the knowledge is more important than just passing a test and checking off a box to put it on your resume. I think for me now, I've been stop search chasing.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much resources. Try to stay focused and absorb the knowledge. That's what I take from that.
All right. So one more thing, since we kind of hit this, right? The very fact is, what if you are now looking like I am, right? I just recently got laid off myself. Understand, key things that you want to be able to push at this point is you want to expand your circle, your social networking circle. And this is not just on LinkedIn. LinkedIn can be helpful. It's even in your local area. Go to those places that have some technology group, or maybe even that hang out. There used to be like VMware socials or networking, sites that you want to learn more about social networking. They had these meetups. I couldn't remember what they were called, meetups, right? You can actually make good contacts in that way to do so. Get your resume, okay, in tip-top shape, okay? And this is something that I didn't realize. The first time I was laid off was about a year ago. And my resume, I hadn't had to actually do a resume since 2005, right? So it was literally 20 years. And I handed that over to someone that looked at resumes, and they said, your resume is 20 years old. I had updated it, but said this just wouldn't even show up and get through any of those automated tools that they scan through at all. So you do want to take a look at your resume seriously. And, at some point, if you can reach out to someone that may do the first run free, you may find the value in that. Or sometimes you may go ahead, especially if you're trying to aim for a higher paying job, pay for the professional resume guy to work through it. I was lucky last time when I actually ended up getting laid off with the resume, because I ended up not realizing I had a friend that worked at Meta, and they said, well, let me run through your resume. And he set back so much work I had to do to my resume to get it ready. But it really did help, because I ended up getting hired not too long after that as well. So even taking opportunities to do that, never turn down a request to meet with someone when you're actually down. It may not even fit you. It may not, but you might find out something. The more connections that you can make, you go, hey, this really doesn't fit me, or they go, this doesn't really fit you, but just say, well, thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it. because you're now expanding your circle is what you're doing. It's hard. Just like, I mean, everybody that's ever been in that situation knows how difficult it is. If you already have plenty of skills, be willing to actually start somewhere in the IT world, even if it's a little bit lower. And I would say this and I said it to myself too. The reason why is that you'll find out that people that are always trying to continue to reach higher, to move towards a position that they ultimately want, it won't be long before they actually try and move on, and they'll leave a gap, and you'll probably be ready to actually step in and fill that gap. If you're willing to actually work in that particular situation that's not your ideal, and now a lateral transfer inside of an organization is actually a lot easier than trying to come in from the outside. So those are all practical things that we can do to really kind of get ourselves in the situation that we need to be, especially when we're currently unemployed as well. So take time to, heck, write a blog, on your LinkedIn or something, post something. Yeah. Do anything. Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say, the local meetups, I'm going to do them. I have a list of, I got from like a convention.
Yeah, there you go. That's the way to do it.
I just haven't, those hacker meetups, I haven't done it. I haven't done local. I've been on LinkedIn mostly, and now I'm doing YouTube. So all great information. I was going to say, we had it till 12. I don't know if you have some time just for a little bonus section.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
The bonus section would be you as the hiring manager, right? But then you as the candidate. What would you like, or what have you experienced? Your experience. Let's start with the hiring manager, right?
Okay.
And maybe I can ask you questions, or what you think when you're reviewing the resumes. Touch slightly, because I feel like resume you can change it so many different ways, right? But what do you think? And then on the candidate side, here would be an example of what do you think is outdated that they keep asking in an interview, or you wish you had a better experience when you're interviewing, or multiple rounds of interviews as a candidate.
Sure. Yeah, as a candidate, it's hard.
Level now, so, you're doing it from like you've been at the tier one, but now you're interviewing for these different ones, so that's different than someone like me.
Yeah. So take it. Let's take it from the training manager perspective, for the hiring manager. I keep saying training manager because that was a position I had a couple of positions ago here. So if I'm actually a hiring manager, it's hard because you think that you write a good job description, and then you hand that over, or you're actually just posting it online, right? We handed it over to our HR team that would then pre-qualify the candidates who they say were great candidates to you to be able to do. But then when you ask them about it, they're like, well, I really don't have this experience, so I wouldn't be able to do this. What you hope for, right, and like anything else, is the perfect fit. Are you ever going to find the perfect fit? No. So what are you really looking for? You're looking for team fit. Is the person really going to fit into the team? And then secondly, are they trainable? Okay, if I need to actually train, like if I believe that they're a good culture fit, am I willing to actually train that person? That's what it comes down to. So who are the people that you kind of realize right away that aren't going to fit? It's the people that already have every answer under the sun for every question that you ever ask. Because you realize something, they're not going to be trainable. That's what it comes down to. Oh yeah, I did this. I already know how to do that. Yeah, sure. No, that's easy. Well, then you realize they're going to do things their way and not the way you need them done. So, I think that as a training manager, that's what you end up with. You end up with a mix of possibly some great candidates that are out there that really do fit the bill. And when you do, you absolutely hire them, when you can. And that did happen to me a couple of times. But there was also one time where it's like, hey, we'd like to sit down and talk to you. And then the guy came right out and said, well, if you want to talk to me, here's what my base salary needs to be. And I get that. That's something that you should kind of be able to have in your mind. It's probably not something you tell the hiring manager right away. Like, if you want to hire me, this is what I'm going to cost you right away. And depending on the way that you say it, it can kind of lead you to go, this is not the right fit. So keep it in your mind of when they ask you, hey, what would your salary be? And you feel like answering them, but I wouldn't start off with, hey, this is, before we move on any farther, my base salary is going to be X. And so you're not going to pay that. Don't even talk to me. For me, it was fairly easy. I'm like, well, you know, everything seems great, but your base salary is not anything that I'm even looking to pay you. And so you end the conversation because you don't need it. Okay. So it's, you're not always going to get every hiring manager like that, but that's the way that I ended up dealing with some of these that I ended up dealing with. Now, from a hiree perspective, in looking, I think, again, you have to figure out whether or not the job you're applying for is something you can do. I think that's what it comes down to. You may not have all the qualifications, but if somebody's willing to meet with you, the question that I would ask, they say, do you have any questions? If you read, if you go through the whole meeting and there's no questions to ask, that or nobody's asking any questions, I think the one question that you should ask that will help people to kind of go, let's move further with this candidate, is that you would actually say, well, I'm more interested in what I can do for you. Where do you see me fitting into this, or what is the need? How can I fulfill what this need is? That again is what hiring managers are looking for. Can this person do what I need them to do? And I think if you ask that question, like, how can I fit into this? What is the need that you have that I think I can actually fit into? And have them explain a story, or say, can you give me an example of a need that you're facing right now? And you might find, like, oh man, yeah, I've done that before. Or you might go, that is interesting, but I believe I can fulfill that. I believe I can actually, fit that, or fulfill that need that you have. So always look at it from the standpoint of that as a hiree, too, when you get the opportunity to do so. It's easy to talk away interviews. I've done it many times. They ask me a question, I just go on, and finally they're like, hey, we've got 5 minutes left in this interview. I'm like, oh crap, I didn't mean to do that. But those are things that you have to worry about. But I think I would ask that question if things kind of drop, like, discussions just kind of, and now you're just looking at each other on, like, oh, what am I supposed to say? Ask the question, like, what's the need that your company has right now, for a position like this?
Okay.
And then answer honestly. Yeah.
And then I was going to say, if you don't mind, maybe touching on your candidate experience, like, then maybe something you feel like, hey, maybe this is outdated that we're still doing this in interview, or maybe that's not even a relevant question.
Yeah, I think today everybody has their process,
Yeah.
in what they want to ask you. So I think you're just going to have to listen for that. The key that I found out for myself is I really need to find out at the beginning, like, how long do you need? How much do you want me to answer this question? Like, I can answer fully. It's going to take me about 10 minutes. Or do you want just kind of a summary of what you've dealt with in this situation, or the things that you can do? Because time is where they're looking, right? As someone that's hiring. If you have a 30-minute time limit, if you're like me, like I said, I've talked to the point where it's like, we've only got like 5 minutes left, and I knew I blew the interview. Okay. And that's just because they asked me a question. I was like, yeah, I've done this. And I just kept going on, and they just didn't interrupt me. They could have, but it kind of shows that they were ready to let me go. But they were just being kind because I had already had that half-hour interview. So, yeah. So you've got to figure that out, like where your throttle is, to do that. There's not a lot anymore that you have to kind of go, I wish they would stop doing this. In sales positions, right? It's always, sell me this. But overall, though, most of the people already know what they're going to ask you. And you've done enough of these, you kind of realize, it's going to be, tell me something about yourself. What's your work experience with this? And then, it kind of goes from that point of how that's going to go, depending on who the team person is asking you those questions.
Okay. And okay. What do you think about the clarity you would like as a candidate? Like, sometimes the hiring, like, they said it was going to be 2 interviews, but then they change it, and or we're going to email you back, and then
Sure.
Or they disappear as
Right.
ghosting, right?
Okay.
And I think it's fair if you apply the job not expecting, but if you're submitted by a job for a recruiter, this is me speaking.
Sure.
right?
No, yeah,
You know, it's all good.
right.
I've had the
No,
best years. I've never had a problem, you know.
yeah.
But what would you say is fair as a candidate, you know, for not just for yourself, but just for others
Mhm.
to clarity on the
Yeah.
hiring
So
process?
I think you do a couple of things in which, at the end when they say, well, thank you for your time, um, you know, sometimes they may end with, well, we'd like to set a second interview. Like they go ahead and tell you that they'd like to set one up. Okay. Uh, and if they say, what's a good time for you? Have a good time if you can. And then you hold them to that, right? So don't, if at all possible, don't sit there and go, I'll expect to hear from you in the future. You may hear from them in 4 weeks from now, and you go, I really was hoping to hear from them in a week. Um, but you can say, if the interview's about 2 weeks away, do you think that'd be in the next couple of weeks, or do you think it'd be in a week? You know, ask those questions like, so when can we, or even just ask, when can we set that up? And they'll say, well, we've got to work through this. So does a week sound good? A couple of weeks? And they'll just say, well, we'll reach out to you by email and go, that's perfectly fine. But be willing to reach out to them. If in a week's time or if in 4 days from now, and you go, hey, I haven't heard from them, say, hey, I just wanted to keep in touch. So I emailed you, I'm looking forward to the time that we can meet again to discuss what we need to discuss. I think reaching back out to them, especially after some time, because everybody is busy. They can forget, even though they've scheduled it on their calendar or they've talked to 10 different people about it. It doesn't mean that all 10 of them actually had the same agenda when they met. So it could have slipped by them. And that's happened to me before. We're like, hey, things got busy. We also had to go out of town. We came back in town and realized we hadn't called you, or talked to you about it. I mean, so be willing to reach back out to them. A simple email is the way that I would do it. Like, hey, we had this, we met last week, it's, you said that you'd contact me in about a week or so, or, just trying to keep in touch, whatever it might be, get back on their radar is the key, especially if you feel like you want to move forward with that company. If you don't care about moving forward with that company, I wouldn't worry about it. So, I think it's better than trying to go, oh, should I reach out to everybody? Not if you don't want to work for that company, no. But if you feel like, hey, this is worth me taking time to do a second interview, for it, then yes, reach out to them again, contact them, and just make sure you are still on the radar. And you can even ask that question like, hey, are we still moving forward with this? Because if not, I'd like to, know so I can move forward. It's easy enough. It's respectful. It allows you to actually keep that contact. You're putting it around the radar of whether or not they need to do something with this. And, but you can say, I assume at this point we're still moving forward with this meeting, and leave it at that and see what happens. And if you don't hear from them, then say, well, I hope that this was just an oversight, but can we get this on the schedule? You don't have to be super pushy, but if you're reaching out to them about a week apart, I think they understand, like, hey, this guy really, he's trying to keep in contact, and at some point I owe the guy an answer. Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
All right. Well, do you have any final words or anything else you want to touch on? Or?
Yeah, I think that we've covered a lot of ground, right? And what I've hoped is that this has been helpful for whoever actually is listening to this or watching this as well.
Future.
Yeah, because I think this is stuff that uh, is important too, and I appreciate you inviting me onto your show to help do this. So, but yeah, thank you for your time too.
Well, thank you, Ronnie. I appreciate it. I forgot to press the record. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have this recording. I'm gonna stop recording now, and then we'll just stop. You stop that, and then start recording. All right, stop the recording.